So I've been asked to answer the question of what circularity is. What is the circular economy? This idea of the concept of circularity. And I think it's important to understand that where this notion of circularity and the circular economy came from before actually moving to understand how it is shaping this very interesting concept of circular Bitcoin economies.
I live in a circular economy here in Berlin. It's a mountain town in El Salvador. Free cities and circular economies are very much aligned, right? They don't have the same approach, but they have the same goal, which is local sovereignty and freedom. I would say I disagree with that vision because if you follow systems theory, technically there are no closed systems.
A Bitcoin circular economy is a defined jurisdiction, if that's perhaps a neighborhood, a town, a city, perhaps even a larger geographical area like a region or even an entire country, where there is a clear vision for using Bitcoin as money, as a means of exchange on an increasing basis. There should be or needs to be an identified leader or group of individuals, a Bitcoiner or Bitcoiners within the group that are sort of taking under their charge the development and the vision for a Bitcoin circular economy. The idea of intention.
So my name is Maria Castillo. I'm a PhD in management, and I am currently the Social and Environmental Impact Director at the 𝐂𝐢𝐭𝐜𝐴 School of Management, so working in topics related to sustainability and inclusion, and I'm very interested in the topics that we'll be discussing here today. So I've been asked to answer the question of what circularity is. What is the circular economy? This idea of the concept of circularity, which can be quite vague or it can be a bit unclear for some people. And I think it's important to understand that where this notion of circularity and the circular economy came from before actually moving to understand how it is shaping this very interesting concept of circular Bitcoin economy. So what role Bitcoin might have when it comes to circular economy. So things that you will be discussing later today. So the concept of circularity is actually not as recent as we would think. This concept emerged in the late 60s with American scientists that began discussing the need to move towards completely closed systems where all resources basically circulate back and forth, never leaving the system, and thus never generating waste. So nothing is lost. We hear the topic of circular economy a lot lately. If you look at the news, if you just type something on your search engine related to circular economy, you'll find tons of resources, tons of information, concrete examples of what companies, what institutions, even countries are doing to move towards circular economies. But this concept has been around for a long, long time. And all of these discussions basically emerging because of the perceived inefficiencies of the economic and the industrial system at that time, so back in the 60s, but that we still see today. And we tend to depict that as being mostly what we call the linear system. So that's the image you see on the left, with the three graphs. You have the linear economy, which can often be referred to as cradle to grave. So cradle, birth, grave, death. And this basically refers to the idea that in today's system, we extract resources, we make something out of those resources, such as a product, we use that product, and then when we're done with it, we throw it away, and the product dies, and it doesn't generate any value back into the system. So we make, we use, we dispose, and it never goes back into the system. So this linear system is very inefficient because, of course, of the waste it produces, the losses it produces, and the costs that are associated to such losses. And of course, this has also negative impacts, especially when you think of today's context, when we're talking about the current environmental situation. All that waste and all those costs that are generated because of those inefficiencies, the inefficiencies in terms of the resource usage, resources that are not unlimited, bring big questions about the system and how that system needs to evolve. So the circular economy, or the notion of circularity, then refers today to a system that's restorative or regenerative by intention and by design. And I stress those two words, intention and design, because they are fundamental for the circular economy. It means that from the start, the system is designed to be circular, meaning that all actors within this ecosystem are actively involved in making a circular, self-sustaining, closed-loop system. So every actor needs to be a part of it, because that is the only way a perfect circular economy can work. So that requires getting buy-in from all of those actors in the ecosystem, depending on what we're talking about, if it's industrial, financial, a community, or a sector. That might take different shapes, but it's getting everyone on board. So it's getting people to buy in, it's developing the right infrastructure to allow that to happen, and ensuring that there is a clear understanding of what circularity means and why it might be beneficial to everyone. And understanding this is not always easy. Understanding the benefits, what you get out of it, is essential when you want to get people to shift, right, and to engage in things that they have not been doing in the same way before. So this is really critical. So as I said before, moving towards this closed loop model requires quite a radical rethinking of our system, of the processes that have been put in place and have existed in many cases for many, many years. It requires a rethinking of the interaction among the actors of the system. So it requires disrupting the status quo, and we all know that that is quite challenging, and that can be extremely complex, and can lead also to a lot of resistance. But moving towards circular economy will drive innovation. It drives innovation. We're seeing clear examples of that today, as I said, more in the industrial and production side of things, with companies investing in R&D, finding ways to close that loop, finding ways to use resources more efficiently, finding ways to give a second life to products that they considered as having no value before. So this is really happening. We're seeing that innovation. So moving towards that will optimize, the processes that we talked about. It will optimize, hopefully, interactions, and it should reduce also, barriers and costs that exist in our current linear system. And again, the whole idea behind this is that we move to a system that's more efficient. So we need to remove the end-of-life concept and replace it with the idea of reusing, right? Nothing is wasted. Everything is reused. Everything goes back. And the end goal of the circular economy, really the most optimistic end goal of the circular economy, is that we should be creating a system that can accomplish sustainable development. And that implies creating environmental quality, right? So if we're talking about resources, it means using resources correctly, because we are running out of some of these resources. But it also means creating economic prosperity, social equity, so that we benefit everyone around the globe, so that we benefit current generations, but we also have a long-term perspective and benefit future generations. And yes, that's a huge and very optimistic objective, but that is the end goal. And everything we need to design, redesign, rethink needs to work in and go in the direction of achieving that. So when I think, circular economy, there's this idea of design and intention. Well, we need to design a system with the intention of achieving these goals. And that's, again, from the start. So it's about creating value. And it's not only about creating value, it's also about reducing value destruction. And I think this is essential in the circular economy, this idea of reducing value destruction. So it requires a whole system perspective, it requires new business models, and it requires a new definition of our current system. So no easy task, but definitely essential, I think, as we move forward and rethink the way we do things and we operate in our economic system today. And beyond the industrial conceptualization of circularity, we also find this term emerging more and more in the financial system, with a current system that is also quite linear, with a number of intermediaries, high costs, high inefficiencies, high barriers to access, particularly for certain parts of the population. And when you look at the numbers, and you have the number here in the slide, and these are the numbers given in the World Bank, who does studies on financial inclusion, but we see today that there are over 1 billion people that are unbanked or underbanked. 1 billion people, this is massive. And that can be due to many different reasons, partly because of the difficulty to access traditional financial services in some regions, so having no banking institution, physical banking institution nearby, potentially not having the right access to internet to be able to also access some of the online financial services that are proposed today. Or it can be because the minimum requirements to open an account or a financial product are out of reach for this population. In some cases, it's because the fees or the cost of managing money and moving money around are too high. And finally, there is still a lack of trust in the financial system in many segments of the population. Some cases because of volatility and instability of markets, because of experiences with previous financial crisis, because of corruption. There's many reasons, but this is a big barrier, right? So how in the financial system today, what opportunities exist to move away from this linear system that's inefficient, that's costly, that is not creating value for everyone? And, there are huge opportunities to rethink the system, to innovate, to disrupt, and break away from what's being proven as inefficient, not generating value for all, and moving towards a circular model that democratizes access to financial services, that promotes financial inclusion, that generates value, and that doesn't destroy value. I think, again, this is the big, ideal goal, but that's what we need to be looking at, and that's what we need to be discussing. So what that closed loop, self-sustaining model looks like in a financial system, I think that's still being defined. I think that's still being tested. And I think what's happening around the notion of circular Bitcoin economies that you'll be talking about later is very interesting. So there's a lot of opportunities out there. There's still a lot of challenges, out there that exist. And those challenges can include, how you actually create financial sustainability out of these new models. How do you scale up this kind of circular models in the financial system and also in production and industrial systems to make sure they're financially sustainable, to make sure they make sense and they can last and benefit in the short term, but also in the long term. At the same time, how do you tear down, strongly institutionalized ways of working? We've been in this linear mindset for ages. So how do you tear down and move away from these institutionalized ways of working, of doing transactions, of producing, of consuming, of understanding the system? So modifying deeply rooted behaviors, not so easy, because that requires, as I said before, buy-in from a number of actors, particularly from actors that have influence in the system, that can nudge the ecosystem towards a more circular direction and then have others kind of follow. But this is a huge challenge, I think, that we face today in the shift towards the circular economy. And when we see it, and what we see happening, in the industrial sector with companies, is that this is moving, but it's moving slowly because it's still proving to be not financially viable. And that is still causing a lot and putting a lot of barriers for full adaptation of a more circular model. And I think this will be the same case when we're talking about the financial system, as we have ideas of how to create a closed loop financial economy. We still have challenges to that. And when we need proof of concept, we need to show that this works so that we can get massive adoption. And we are still in that process of testing, in that process of ensuring that things work. So how do we get there? And I think this raises a big question and an interesting question, and I'd be happy to hear what the other panelists think about this. But what is the need for public policy in this sphere? We see more and more public policy in Europe for to provide incentives for circular economy in the industrial sector, in some sectors of the economy particularly. So what is the role of public policy, of governments, in shifting towards circularity, and how will that help to accelerate things? And when we're talking about, cryptocurrencies, or we're talking about money, what is the role of public policy to try to accelerate, this shift towards circularity, and mostly to this kind of perfect circularity where everything is connected and where everyone is on board? So we do see an interesting movement. We see things happening. We hear, and you will hear a lot of interesting examples later today, but there are still many challenges ahead. And those challenges are not always easy to overcome, but there are massive opportunities and there are signs of movements. And I think we will be seeing much more of those in the next few years. And I think the examples that are going to be discussed with you today are great examples of inspiration that still raise questions, that still face challenges, but that will, I think, help drive the movement of circularity, circular economy into a much wider and scaled up dimension. So thank you very much for your attention, for your time, and please, you have my contact here. Feel free to contact me if you want to connect, if you want to engage. You can contact me through LinkedIn. Very happy to connect.
So yeah, I have a couple of things I can talk about that are relevant to the discussion today. So I live in El Salvador. I'm French, but I've arrived here in the end of 2022. I live in a circular economy here in Berlin. It's a mountain town in El Salvador. And I've also started a circular economy on an island called La Pirraya. And now I work with Mi Primer Bitcoin as the international relations manager. And so what we do is we are creating a community of Bitcoin communities so that they can share best practices and just speed up the timeline by all learning from each other. So I took a lot of notes. It was very, very interesting. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Maria, for these presentations. I'd like to touch on a few points before starting sharing my experiences. I would like to say that free cities and circular economies are very much aligned, right? They don't have the same approach, but they have the same goal, which is local sovereignty and freedom. And this is what we're all looking for, right? So this is very, very interesting. So I heard Maria mention that in circular economies and with circularity, we were looking for building closed loop systems where nothing enters and nothing leaves, no input, no output, everything stays inside the closed loop system. And I would say I disagree with that vision, because if you follow systems theory, technically there are no closed systems, right? Like every system, which is something that is defined by humans, that doesn't really have boundaries besides the ones that we attribute to them, exist inside other bigger systems and are composed by smaller systems. And so there is always communication and a flow of resources, information, structure between all of these levels of organization. So this is just a premise I want to pose before continuing, because for circular economies in terms of Bitcoin, the goal is not to create this circularity and to create like autonomous zones, right? We are still trying to spread Bitcoin and this movement, this grassroots movement around the world from the bottom up. So again, we're still trying to create link, especially between the circular economies. And so my first experience was in Isla La Pirraya. I was given the hard task of bootstrapping a circular economy on this island of El Salvador, which is a small island, and it had foundational problems that needed to be addressed to kickstart this circular economy. It has a lot of issues, like there's no trash management, there's no public lighting, there's flooding by both the rain and the seawater. So there was a ton of problems that we had to address before starting the circular economy project. But we used them to actually kickstart the circular economy by paying workers in Bitcoin. And so the goal was to bring them to accept Bitcoin as a way of payment and as a store of value in exchange for work and in exchange as well for new revenue streams. Because again, even though it's a circular economy, things come in and things go out. Especially on this island, the idea was to bring tourism so that people could earn money via Bitcoin. So what we did is we organized an event, a beach soccer tournament. And beforehand, we trained everyone on the island how to accept Bitcoin, the businesses, how to accept Bitcoin with special POSs for the event. We gave them English classes, Spanish classes. We created workshops for the entrepreneurs, a lot of things to prepare for this event, so that the day of the event, tourists would come and would spend the Bitcoin and create new revenue streams for the circular economy of La Piraya. But again, the goal, and this is where the circularity comes in, is that we wanted the Bitcoin, the money, to stay in the island. So this is when you have to do a lot of work beforehand. You have to go see the businesses and go see the suppliers of these businesses, so that all of them can accept Bitcoin, so that the workers can spend Bitcoin in the business, and that the business can spend its Bitcoin at their suppliers, and so on and so forth. So again, that highlights the difficulty of circular economies, right? Is that there is always a flow of money from outside and to the outside again. So the goal is to make it stay inside, but I don't think closing the system is something that is achievable in practice. So this is how we started. Then we gathered more engagement. People were ready to work with us. And so what we did is we continued with the same kind of process. We were working on the foundational level of the circular economy by managing bigger projects and rewarding people for their work in Bitcoin. So we built a road, we renovated the communal house, we renovated the beach soccer field, we even created a seawall. And so all of this participated to the creation of this circular economy on the island. Again, it could be circular, but only because there was input in terms of Bitcoin. We had a funding source that could input Bitcoin on the island, so that we could work on these projects and reward people for their work. So that was on the island. Again, another challenge is to have a group of people or individuals that pursue the project even though you're not there anymore. I'm not from the island, so I stayed for 6 months, and the challenge was always the end of the project. Like, how do we make sure that the circular economy continues to grow when I'm not here anymore to impulse the project and to oversee their completion? And so we found someone on the island. His name is Isaac, and he was a beach soccer professional player, and now he teaches kids how to play beach soccer, and he pays everything that is about that, like water, shirts, bowls, whatever. He pays everything in Bitcoin, and so we keep the momentum that we built. And there is another guy whose name is Jorge, who gives. He's part of my team. He's part of Mi Primer Bitcoin. He gives weekly classes about Bitcoin to the individuals of the island, so that they have a better understanding of how it works, why it's better than the dollar for even either saving or transacting. And so this is how we try to keep the project going. The other experience I have is I live in a circular economy. So this town called Berlin, It's a mountain town. It's very, very, very different from La Piraya. There's much more economic activity. There is, I would say big, but there is a small Bitcoin community, but very, very active, that successfully onboarded more than 100 businesses onto Bitcoin. So if you're a Bitcoiner, a tourist, a sovereign individual, you can come to this town and spend only Bitcoin. So this is very, very powerful. But again, it faces new challenges, right? One of them is, how do you bring more tourism, more revenue streams, so that the city can grow, can improve, etc. And there's also, how do you make sure that these businesses keep the Bitcoin to save in Bitcoin? How do you make sure that individuals go and spend Bitcoin, ask to be paid in Bitcoin, to close the loop of the circular economy? So this is one of the new challenges here. But again, I think circular economy is, the term circular economy is a bit, has been a bit co-opted by Bitcoiners, because I don't think it perfectly fits the description of the basic circular economy. I would say that Bitcoin circular economy's aim is to bring back to the lower levels of organization, the individual, the family, the city, the value that has been sucked up by the higher levels of organization, like the government, by fiat money. And so I would say that for most countries, we shouldn't even wait for top-down policy, as the governments are the ones that are responsible for the exponential waste of resources via money printing. And I would end with the idea that Bitcoin is a grassroots movement from the bottom up, and Bitcoin communities and circular economies are the manifestation of this movement.
I've invited you to join the roundtable because of your brand new hat, that of coordinator of the Federation of the Bitcoin Circular Economies. And I understand that it's a new thing that you've been setting up, right?
Indeed. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation to join you and to do my best to speak on behalf of the Federation and my colleagues who are working to set it up. But you're right, it's a very fresh organization. We've been discussing establishing this federation for the last 6 months or so, and we're finally at the point now where we're building some organizational infrastructure, developing a bit of a roadmap and a vision for what's possible, and we're really excited to begin rolling it out over
well, that's it.
months.
I think we first met 6 months ago when you were just just starting really to establish the federation, and since then I understand that you've been traveling quite a bit to discover, to map these initiatives and characterize them. So how would you define a Bitcoin circular economy, Scott?
At core, a Bitcoin circular economy is a defined jurisdiction, if that's perhaps a neighborhood, a town, a city, perhaps even a larger geographical area like a region or even an entire country, where there is a clear vision for using Bitcoin as money, as a means of exchange on an increasing basis. I think the aspirational vision is that one could live on a Bitcoin standard in a Bitcoin circular economy, where one could pay for all of one's daily ongoing needs, one's electricity bill, one's groceries, petrol or gas for one's car, rent or a mortgage payment, etc., that all of those can be paid for with Bitcoin. And that it's not just a matter of paying for Bitcoin, but really Bitcoin circulates through the economy, so that if I was buying my daily coffee at a little cafe, that the owner of that cafe would hopefully be paying their employees, at least in part, in Bitcoin, and any money that's spent at that cafe would then be used by the merchant to take care of their own needs, purchasing supplies from suppliers, paying their own living costs through Bitcoin, etc. So the idea is that money comes into the community and stays in the community as Bitcoin, that is. At the Federation, we wanted to figure out a way or ways that we could actually bring some increased definition to what Bitcoin circular economies look like, and some ways to help local Bitcoin circular economies, wherever they are on their journey to evolve to next steps or more defined expressions of that circular economy. And so we've started by not only identifying communities that in essence are operating as a Bitcoin circular economy, regardless of how far along they are on that journey, but to try to bring some definition and to categorize those in ways that we can help them and help others understand what distinguishes an early stage Bitcoin circular economy from one that's a little bit more developed. And so we've started by categorizing Bitcoin circular economies according to 5 tiers, tiers 1 through 5, which as you go from tier 1 and tier 5, it reflects a bit more of a fully developed expression of the Bitcoin circular economy. And there are core components that fit into each of those tiers. So you satisfy more of those components as you go further along the tier structure. Right.
And just is that possible for you to give us a glimpse of what are those criteria that along which you progress and you move from the first tier to the 5th tier?
Absolutely. So from the outset, it's important for any movement, any organization that's bringing together entities into a federation or an association to have some clear marker points or boundaries as to what is a minimum basis to be involved in or participate in that movement, to be considered a member or group, a constituent group.
Minimum requirements, right?
And so, in terms of minimum requirements, a tier 1 is essentially that in the local community, there is evidence that Bitcoin is being used as a medium of exchange. And that could be at a very, very small scale. It might be one merchant, it might be 2 or 3 people in the community who are using Bitcoin as a medium of exchange for daily life. A second is that there should be or needs to be an identified leader or group of individuals, a Bitcoiner or Bitcoiners within the group that are sort of taking under their charge the development and the vision for Bitcoin circular economy. The idea of intention. And that there's a focal point and leaders who want to help advance a Bitcoin circular economy. And then third, that they've identified a particular jurisdiction that they intend to work in. So that might be the local neighborhood. As I said, it could be an entire town. It could be an entire nation. So it's those 3 core components: that there's some evidence that Bitcoin is being used as money, as a medium of exchange, that there's an identified leader or group of individuals who are who have identified their intention to grow a circular economy, and then third, that they've identified a jurisdiction that they're going to be working in.
So the progression then, as you move to the higher tiers, is merely a reflection of an increasing intensity of penetration and adoption of Bitcoin within the economy, or are there other
that's right, and the types of activities. And so, if I was just to look at this sort of in terms of the bookends of tier 1 to tier 5, tier 5 reflects, to the best of what we're able to observe right now and understand about the evolution of a Bitcoin circular economy. Tier 5 would mean that something like Bitcoin 𝐂𝐤𝐫𝐜 in South Africa or Bitcoin beach in El Salvador, that not only is Bitcoin being used as a medium of exchange in the local community, not only is there a leadership group for this, but there's actually an organized, incorporated entity that is driving the move for a Bitcoin circular economy. And that organization has staff and volunteers which are advancing this. And then one of the sort of furthest points of development of the Bitcoin circular economy is that there's not a shift, but a progression from the use of Bitcoin as a medium of exchange to actually advancing the idea of Bitcoin as a unit of account.
Right.
Okay. And so in El 𝐶𝐬𝐿 and in the 𝐂𝐤𝐫𝐜 outside of Mossel Bay, where Bitcoin 𝐂𝐤𝐫𝐜 operates, both of those communities are actually trying to do whatever they can to have Bitcoin be the unit of account for their organizations. And so they talk about the value and the price of things not with reference to fiat anymore. So not with reference to the rand or not with reference to the US dollar, but Bitcoin itself. Staff are paid in Bitcoin. The engagement of local merchants and the discussion is with Bitcoin as the reference point. And so shifting the narrative from Bitcoin in relation to fiat to Bitcoin being the standard. And so that gives you a sense of the sort of bookends from a nascent group in tier 1 that has the idea of establishing a Bitcoin circular economy with individuals who are taking leadership of that, and there being some small evidence of Bitcoin being used as a medium of exchange, all the way to tier 5, where you have a much more organized, resourced, staffed approach to building out the circular economy with Bitcoin ultimately as your local unit of account. And then in between that, from tier 1 to tier 5, you have a progression of different types of activities that would reflect a more robust expression of a circular economy as you go along. So adding into, moving on from tier 1, so adding in local meetups and local, other local educational efforts, doing organized onboarding and education and support for merchants, those sorts of things. So that's intended to provide individuals working in circular economies and anyone who's thinking of starting a local circular economy a bit of a guide or a roadmap as to how to evolve.
That's interesting. I think I'll paste, a link directing to your website. Are you able to see some patterns, geographically speaking, whereby in certain region of the world, the Bitcoin circular economy trends toward a certain function, or
Certainly. I mean, there are a few that are clear. The differences between a circular economy in the global north or in a more, economically advanced country like in Lugano in Switzerland or Madeira, as opposed to in the global south. The local context, the prevailing economic conditions, disparities, etc., are going to drive understandably the reasons for the circular economy, how it takes shape, and some of the needs. And so there are some distinctions between circular economies in the global north and in the global south. And then aside from that, I don't know if I would describe patterns or trends as much as to say that, and this is something that attracted me to Bitcoin circular economies as I got to know some of them a bit more closely, is that they truly are community driven in a fundamental sense. And that's something that was very near and dear to me and important to me, coming from my work with community health centers around the world. In the community health center world, we used to say, once you've seen one community health center, you've seen one community health center, which was a way of saying that while there is a shared model and approach to integrating primary healthcare through teams of providers with health promotion programs, illness prevention services, and so forth. They're very much attuned to and driven by the local needs of the community. And so similarly with Bitcoin Circular Economies, what I've observed and I think is part of the virtue of these circular economies is really they're from the grassroots up and attuned to local needs. And so there are different entry points into building the circular economy, and by trial and error, I think each local circular economy is identifying factors for success and what is most needed in the local community. And so we as a federation are really trying to bring together, all of these different circular economies to learn from each other, to share experiences, and to, where possible, to pair like communities with each other for support and so forth.
Scott, thanks a lot for this great overview and an introduction to your work and that of your colleagues, members of the Federation.
Wonderful. Thanks for the invitation to join you. And just in parting, an open invitation. If anyone listening to this is beginning a local circular economy or has looked at our website and don't see their local circular economy represented in some way, please reach out to us. Again, we're just getting started. This is a very administratively lean global movement, and so any omissions is not on purpose. So please reach out, and look forward to connecting with new groups and groups that we weren't aware of, and figuring out how to help you get connected to others and to moving forward. And looking forward to seeing where we are this time next year.